Hey everybody, hey Bluffdale, how's it going? It's been a little while since I shared a video, so I wanted to create another one and present you guys with some more information, I think, which actually would be really important. Maybe the most important video you watch about the city finances in maybe a little while, so I think this will be really cool for you to see. Because as I've been talking to a lot of people, obviously referendums and the fire department kind of come up a lot. And, there's still mixed feelings about that. Obviously, the majority of the people voted for the referendums and to overturn the taxes, but there's still a lot of people that think they were really bad, right? So I've been looking and I wanted to check and see during those 2 years of the referendums, what actually happened with our finances. If you remember, each year we were discussing the tax increases, it was all projections. And we never really had any, actual numbers of what actually happened in those years to make those decisions. So I've gone back and I've looked and I've been seeing, okay, after we overturned the 2 tax increases, what was the result for the city? Did it hurt us? Did it have zero effect? And see kind of what was the situation. So I think you'll see, and the reason I want to show this video is because now you don't have to just have an opinion about the referendums. These are facts. You can see what actually happened. And there's no more real debate of what was the result? We can tell what the results are now. And if you have an open mind, you'll see, and maybe it'll change the way you perceived what the city finances were at the time. And you don't have to just kind of go off of assumptions and opinions and forecasts, like solid actual data. So here we go. So I'll show this on the screen here, but what you're going to see is you're going to see about 4 different years worth so that we can have some comparisons. But we're really looking at fiscal year 23 and fiscal year 24. Those were the years that the referendums happened and the votes happened. In 2023, almost 70% of the people voted to overturn the tax. And in fiscal year 24, I can't remember the final percentage, but it was over 50% overturned the second tax in a row. So those are the key years, right? But we put the fiscal year 2022 up there for comparison reasons. And what you're seeing as the numbers, you're seeing are recurring revenues. So these are not like one-time grants or anything like that. These are the recurring revenues in the general fund: property tax, sales tax, franchise tax, license permits, other fines, miscellaneous, and general government fees, okay? So if you look at 2022, our total revenue was $12.36 million, okay? So that's the year before the first referendum and the first tax increase. So in fiscal year 2023, after the tax increase was removed, our revenue increased to $13.91 million. So increased by $1.55 million that year. That's a lot, right? And if you remember, that was one of our key arguments of not raising taxes, is because we were going through a period of growth and those revenues were increasing. So don't raise taxes just yet until we know kind of how that growth is impacting us. And in this case, we know we got a lot of money. So first question we should probably be asking is, okay, if our revenues increase so much, why didn't we have enough to hire at least some of the firefighters that year? And, I think they were asking for, $500,000 or $600,000 to convert the fire department. So, we had tons of more revenue, So, okay, question number 1. Seems like we should have had enough, right? Well, there's also the question of expenses, right? Okay, obviously, you have to have a lot of expenses. So maybe we had really high expenses. And so that revenue just kind of broke even. Well, actually, you can see one of the other key lines here is our general reserve fund. And comparing 2022 to the first year of the referendum when a tax was overturned, our reserves actually increased from $3 million to $3.9 million. So it's almost a $900,000 increase in those funds that didn't get used in general fund expenses. So that means that money could have been used for fire, police, for other staff, other costs within the general fund, but it went unused basically, and our reserves increased a lot. So in that first year, if we would have waited to increase our taxes, even if we didn't increase the taxes that year, or in this case, the tax was removed, if we would have budgeted and hired at least some of the firefighters, we would have had enough money. And our reserves still would have gone up, our revenue would have gone up. It wouldn't have hurt us at all to hire those firemen during that year, which is kind of sad, if we really believe that those numbers and the part-timers were not effective at serving our city in terms of the fire department, then we could have gone ahead and hired those employees and not have hurt ourselves in either the reserves or in our financials at all. So that's a really, really critical thing, right? The other thing to note, just always want to plug this, is that for the Parks and Rec department that year, our budget actually increased by, about $200,000 that year. Sorry, moving my camera around. $200,000. So remember, fire department didn't have enough money to increase their budget and convert their employees to full-time, but we had enough to increase the cost of the park. So again, two of my key arguments for running the referendum and overturning tax was, one, we were going to have enough money anyways with all the growth that we're having. I think that is unequivocally proven correct. We had a budget reserve increase of almost $900,000. At the same time, I was saying, hey, we shouldn't be spending more on parks if we don't have enough firemen. And I think that is just the sad reality that was the priority back then. So let's look at fiscal year 2024. Another year, another tax increase, another referendum that overturned the tax increase. So now this year is interesting. If you add up all of our recurring revenues, we actually were flat to just a tiny bit down by about $10,000. We stayed at about 13.9 million. So revenue was flat. That actually surprised me when I saw that. I thought we would have seen a little bit more growth there, but things are going to fluctuate. And in this case, it looks like our miscellaneous and our general government fees all decreased that year, but our property tax, our sales tax, our franchise fees, and permits all increased. So we had overall, pretty flat. But if you look at what happened, even though we had flat revenues that year, our expenses, we didn't spend as much, and we ended up even increasing our general fund reserves even more. We went from about 3.9 million in fiscal year 23 to 4.3 million in fiscal year 24. And, we're already well over 20% of our reserves at this point, getting closer and closer to 30%, which is more than double the amount that many of the cities keep, which, is great if we don't need the money, keep it in reserves, right? That's fantastic. But again, this shows us, we had plenty of money to hire even some more firemen and do more to fund the fire department that year because our reserves kept growing, which means, we just didn't spend the money that we had, and it went kind of unused in that way. So another year where, we can look back and say, without a doubt, the city had plenty of money to move forward with those firemen and the fire department costs. At the same time, sorry, I gotta move this camera around just a bit. What happened with our parks department? Well, another big increase that year. We increased by over $300,000. So again, Parks and Rec was growing. City was saying we didn't have enough money for fire, but the Parks department was growing, and which is great for the parks and those people, but you can't do that in contrast and to the detriment of our fire and police, right? So that again was a major reason why the referendums were so popular and the tax increases were so unpopular, that we had the wrong priority in terms of where we were spending dollars. But more important now, because at the time we're still, when these decisions were made, a lot of time we were doing forecasts and it was hard to know exactly what was happening. But the people that ran the referendums, including myself, were saying the trends for revenue are increasing. We have healthy finances. We should be able to move ahead hiring some of the fire and taking care of them without raising taxes. And both of these years show that was correct. Even if we would have done half the fire department hiring one year and half the other, we had enough money. And now with these numbers, we know we could have moved forward and not had those risks to the service that we were looking at. So I think this is really important. And just one last thing, if you look over at the final year, fiscal year 2025, our revenues jumped again. So our revenues went from 3.9 million in fiscal year 24 to 14.61 million in fiscal year 25. So about a $700,000 increase. So that was the year that the new fee took place. And so I did not like putting the fee in place. So with another $700,000 in revenue, why are we also trying to get a fee in place to help with more revenue? Especially when the last 2 years showed that our reserves were growing and we had enough money to cover our most important expenses. So I think this kind of settles that debate a little bit. During those 2 years, revenues were growing, we were healthy, we were building our reserves, which is not good when you say, you have not enough budget for the fire department. That's not a good thing to then build your reserves at that time. So we should have moved forward with the fire department hiring, even without the tax increases, but should have moved forward even after the referendums passed and the taxes were overturned. So we need to make sure we have the right priorities going forward. We can't put these other nice to have things, and unfortunately some of these programs are nice to have over fire and police. Second thing is, if you agree with me, I would really encourage you to reach out to our city council now. I think this needs to be a discussion in one of the agendas, because our city council, unfortunately, they're most of the time just looking at projections. They don't really have as very, very recent data to go off of that is actuals. And that's something we need to correct. We need to fix the timing of that information and move it up quicker so that the city council can make better decisions about that. But more importantly, the city council needs to put this on the agenda and look at, analyze, why didn't we hire the fire department at the time? What false assumptions did we make? What incorrect forecasts did we have? What, how much of the timing played into all this? And analyze the decision-making and the budgeting and the planning process to hopefully learn some things and to possibly avoid this in the future. If we don't go back and learn from these actuals and have a discussion about them, then we're likely to repeat the same mistakes in the future. So if you guys agree with this, I hope that you'll share this with the city council and ask them to put this on the agenda, because I think this is a really, really critical learning point for us. So not sure if you guys have any questions, reach out to me, let me know what you think. But I think in the end, myself and all the people that voted and supported the referendums, we were proven right that we had the money, the city was growing, and the fire department could have had, if not all, probably most of the salaries that they needed to grow and change to a more full-time fire department. So anyways, message me, comment, let me know how you think. Bye.